So, welcome today on platform of Beta Consultancy. Today we have a young entrepreneur. This is Shaista Baljee, who is an alumna of University of Pennsylvania, USA, where she studied psychology and education. And she is also a management graduate from ISB Hyderabad. And she founded Ivy Aspire Consulting in 2010, based out of Bangalore. And Ivy Aspire is an end-to-end higher education preparation and counseling services. So welcome, ma'am, to the platform.
Thank you so much. We're very excited to be here. I'm looking forward to being able to answer any questions you have for me and hopefully share a few insights that I've gained over the years.
Oh, thank you. So, ma'am, please tell us about your journey. Like, how did you venture in UPenn, and how was your experience in UPenn and setting up your consulting venture?
So I was one of those few who I think knew early on that they would work with people. So I did have that clarity, I think, from a very young age that I was less behind the desk, less a numbers person, but more a people person. So I knew that very young. And I always knew that I would work with kids. Of course, when I had this realization, I myself was a kid. I was around maybe 12 or 14. So, in comparison, kids in my head that age were much younger. As you grow older, the definition of kids also evolves. But I always knew that, which did lead me to study psychology at college. I'm a developmental psychologist. As I went to Penn, I realized that there were things that I was very interested in. But before I applied to college, I think a lot of people may have thought I was confused or had too many interests. When I did study abroad, I learned that that's called interdisciplinary learning, where you can learn multiple things, you can learn across disciplines and tie it all together. So I was fortunate to get that at Penn, where I was able to marry this with a degree in marketing from Wharton, where I focused on marketing as well as media. And I have a degree in communication studies from the Edinburgh School for Communication. But to rewind a little bit, I didn't always know that I would study abroad. It was something that was a far-fetched dream. I knew a cousin or two who had studied abroad. It wasn't on my radar. And as much as I advise the students who come to me, start early, be planned. It's always better to have a plan of action. Let's not stress last minute. That wasn't my journey. Which is why, as you know, even if kids come to me late, I always feel for them because I was one of them. And I'm glad that I persisted. So the one thing that I learned is truly, as cliched as it may sound, it really never is too late. If you believe strongly in something, you should do everything to try and achieve it, throw everything and the kitchen sink. And hopefully it should work out. If not, at least you'll never live with a regret that you didn't try. So that led me to UPenn, where I studied these interesting set of things. Because I was fortunate enough to make it to my dream school, along the way, I had lots of people who had lots of advice to give. And I think that's one of India's specialties, right? Everybody from the paper boy to the milkman to an aunt, an uncle, an aunt's daughter had something to say about my journey and where I should study and how I should go about it. But before I fault anybody else, I'm going to first put my mother in the middle of it because she solicited the advice. I think if she met anybody at that age, it was like, what should my daughter do? Where should she study? Am I missing something? And people love to tell her things. So there was literally a time, I think, where I must have had 1,000 pieces of contradictory advice shared with me via my mom to people she had spoken to. So it's what I call the kitty party syndrome. And I felt no other child should ever be subjected to that. All well meaning, everything came from a place of love. Everyone wanted to see me do well. But I don't think anybody really knew me. And I also realized how quickly Chinese whispers can spread. So, what people said as the honest truth was often hearsay, which had come to them through someone. So, by the time it came to me, it wasn't true anymore. I also felt in this journey while my family had a lot of support, and we were fortunate to truly have good people who guide us through this as well. I felt very alone. At 17, I remember feeling lost, feeling confused, not knowing the future. As accomplished as I may be, there was, of course, feelings of self doubt. And for the first time, as a 17-year-old, my entire sense of validation was going to come from getting into a university, which would then trickle into how peers, friends, and family thought of me. And that was a very daunting task. And sometimes, I realize that it's not the pressure that family or friends place on you, but it's the internal pressure we face on ourselves. And it's easy to make up an excuse to family. It's easy to make up an excuse to friends and say, I didn't want that school. It wasn't meant for me. I'm glad it worked out this way. but it's very difficult to look at yourself in the mirror and then lie to yourself. And I realized how lonely and scary this journey could be. And again, I remember telling myself, I hope no one has to ever go through this alone again, irrespective of outcome. Right? I learned how important it is to feel like a winner. You could even get into a great school and not feel great about yourself. And you could get into not so great a school, feel wonderful about yourself, and then go on to achieve. So it was these little niggling things that stayed with me through my college experience that, kind of, I think, laid the foundation for Ivy Aspire. I then went on to college and I was very curious. Why did I get in? Why did the other girl who I thought maybe was more accomplished not get in, or someone had better scores? And, you've heard so much that colleges are looking at this and this is the template. And I wanted to know why I had gotten in, to be very honest. So I spent a lot of my time working with admissions officers, writing research papers, really understanding I wanted this magic formula, not to share it, but just for my own knowledge. And as I spoke to people, as I researched further, I fine-tuned my interest of research. And I realized that there was no formula. That was the big aha moment. But I realized the key elements that go into play. And this was something that I felt would take a long time for other aspirants to understand, that while there isn't a formula, and there truly isn't, what are the key things and how do you have to manipulate this like the art to help you stand out? I then went on, I applied to business school, got into business school, worked on that admissions committee. So that had always been my interest. Always working with education, always working in admissions committees, interviewing, researching, understanding. I worked on the interview panel, interviewed people for Wharton, interviewed people for ISB. So by then I had really got most of my 360-degree experience, where I had been an applicant, I had worked in side committees, I had done the interview portion. And then I think how all ventures start. They start with someone reaching out to you for help, which is typically a family member. Then it becomes a family friend. Then it becomes a friend of a friend. So it came to a point where I was helping a very close family friend apply to college. I had recommended a consultant to her actually. And I said, go to this person. She's excellent. You will be completely sorted. And I was taking a little bit of a sabbatical from work. And this girl whom I had highly recommended to another consultant came to me and said, Shaista, can you help me with essays? And I looked at her very confused, saying, I'm happy to do it, but you're with a professional who's excellent. What can I do? Because, nobody takes the time to sit down one-on-one, understand your story. A lot of templates are given, a lot of advice is given, but I don't feel someone's getting my version. So it started more as I had a couple of hours on my hand. I was happy to help her. She was a family friend. And we worked together on crafting her story. Long story short, I enjoyed it tremendously. But what came out of it was a relationship. As a family friend, she was meant to, because of family, call me Didi, but she never really did. And at the end of this 6-month relationship, I earned the title of D, which I think is the coolest thing. So she was the first kid I ever worked with many, many years ago. She went to Emory. I then helped her apply for her master's to Sotheby. And then we did her MBA at Columbia. So, she's really been the one who got me started. But what I did realize is A, I'm good at this, right? I think I did pretty well. B, I was highly appreciated. So, you're adding value. And C, right. I loved the relationship. I had earned a relationship. Wow. So she was not now someone who was beholden to me because of family. Oh. Of course, it's always difficult to take the leap, right? It's always easier to do something structured. I had worked in consulting. I had touched with a very good career in human resource consulting. I was recruited by Towers Perrin. I was called back for an H-1B visa at an MBA salary. I had worked in the Campbell Soup Company. I had worked at WHYY. So I had a pretty successful run at, the corporate world. So it was tempting to consider the corporate world. However, I had very little exposure to corporate India. I had interned at the Times of India, which is way back when I was 18, but it was a paid internship, which felt very cool back in the day. So I said, let me just come back. Let me do what I know. Let me just go back to something that's more structured. So, best kept secret is I spent a year at USL in Bangalore in the towers at UB City, and I worked in their market research practice. And I was very much there when UB City came to me. And I realized while I was doing my job, how little of value I was adding. And that's when it hit me. And I wanted to spend most of my time helping acquaintances of acquaintances of acquaintances apply to college. So sometimes I would get off flights and I would have like a 10-minute window and an acquaintance of an acquaintance called me. And I was happy to offer the help. And I was sitting at a wedding of a very dear friend of mine from Penn. And I had my whole Penn gang around me. And I said, should I do this, guys? I don't know. I'm confused. And they said, go for it. And I think when your peers support you, it's easier to take the leap of faith. So I just did. And that led me to form Ivy Aspire. And then there was no looking back.
Oh, wow. That's a very fulfilling, enterprise that you have got. So you have anyway answered that you chose counseling because of your own liking of the profession. And you have also shared that what was the real motivation. So now, if you can just tell us, like, how was the first 2 years of your venture in its formative years?
So this is something that I think I've done very differently. I don't know if I've done it right, but this is something that I strongly believe in. I think there are a few professions, maybe medicine is one of them, maybe law is one of them, and I strongly believe in education, where the fanciest billboard, the best advertisement doesn't exactly attract the customer. And I say this very sheepishly because I have 2 degrees in marketing, one from Wharton, and it was my major at ISB as well. And I know my professors will definitely say, oh God, we definitely should not have had her in our class. But I don't do any marketing. And I realized that if I were to make an impact, my customer would market me. So it is pure word of mouth. And I started with this belief where a lot of people thought that wasn't a sensible way to go. I did come from a family of means. I could have utilized it. I chose not to. That was a very conscious decision. I felt very strongly about being self-made. And that's a chip I carry very proudly on my shoulder that I bootstrapped. I still have dear friends who remind me that I've done things as crazy as I would enter these educational fairs, and I would actually solicit people there. I would tell them who I am, I'd take my business cards, and I would just talk to people. And I was maybe, I don't know, idealistic enough, or call me arrogant enough, or call me foolish enough to believe if someone met with me, heard my story, saw my passion, that's all they would need. I didn't need the fancy bells and whistles. I didn't need the marketing. So I would actually go to education fairs. I'd tell people what I do, where I'm from. And I learned a lot, when you meet your customer directly. And I've always kept my customer close. I keep very few layers between myself and the customer. When I came to India, I thought that people would have stars in their eyes when they would see the name Wharton. But I realized that's not the name that resonated. When people heard ISB, that was the name that people were drawn to. And they'd say, you're from ISB. Tell me more. They were sold, which is an insight I would never have gained had I done it through the traditional, take out an ad in this paper and this one will help you with that.
True.
So I unlearned all I did at USL, which was all about billboards and all about activations, to doing it myself. I actually used a dear friend who I knew who was very senior at, I want to say, HP at that time. And I actually went, I took a favor from him and I put this booth. And I sat for 2 days straight at the cafeteria of HP with my materials and I marketed. And that is literally what I've done. I was there everywhere. If you wanted me to come to a college 3 hours away and talk, I would do it. I had no qualms, I had no ego, and I thought everything that I did was pure brand building because I am my brand. No matter what bells and whistles I put, I have to put myself out there. And you realize when you do these things so many years later into your career that it's still, to my mind, much better than an amazing Insta campaign or a campaign on Facebook. When I had a very, very, very old client, I talked about nearly 10 to 12 years ago, who sent me a LinkedIn message saying, hey, I did the GMAT with you when you used to sit outside HP. I'm doing my MBA at MIT Sloan, and I've just recommended you to my nephew in Qatar.
Oh, wow.
So I feel like that has really paid. And if I could, recommend something to an entrepreneur, especially in today's day and age, I know there are lots of smart ways to do it. We know all the SEO and the hacks and all of that stuff. And while I'm not diluting that, I think sometimes word of mouth is something that we've forgotten. And that kind of goodwill, I think, has really kept my business going. And perhaps to some extent has helped me through tough times as well.
Oh, wow, man. That's an amazing message that goodwill marketing is the best technique. Okay, ma'am, how many students you must have helped in all this last 10 to 12 years?
So I've had the luxury of touching the lives of over 5,000 students. We also do test preparation. We also do, aptitude testing. So we offer a range of services. So I've been fortunate to be a part of the lives of many students. Of course, through my individual one-on-one, there are fewer lives I can impact. And that's the decision that I made. So while my model may not be very scalable, and I have, of course, made the effort to be in Bombay, I have an office in Chennai as well. Eventually, by choice, I never want to dilute the impact I can have on a student's life or dilute the relationship.
So how did the idea came to you? How did you finalize your idea of this one? You had many choices, you're creative, and how did this idea and and how did you trigger you want to become entrepreneur, okay, rather than doing job?
So I'll tell you where the idea of being an entrepreneur came. When I did start this, I don't think startups were the buzzword or startups were as in as they are today. I did also have a history of entrepreneurship. At 16, I had my own startup. We didn't use fancy terminology then. We didn't call it a startup, we didn't call it those things. But I used to run a pretty cool thing where I used to teach people gift packaging. I used to run many classes, and I was fairly successful for way back when. And I would then also take orders on, corporate gift wrapping, individual wrapping. So I did have a history. I was comfortable in this model. I was comfortable with the risk. I was comfortable with the reward. So I did have that backing me. I did have enough of a flavor of the corporate world to understand what some of the advantages were. The decision to do this on my own, honestly, was a very practical one. I did know again very early on that I did not ever want to give up work. And I do know in a girl's life, and this may be again more unique to girls than it is to boys, sorry to be sexist here, there are many opportunities and many turning points in a girl's life to give up work. One, typically when you get married. Second, when you have your kids. And to be fair, it's a very difficult thing to be able to do when your child is sick and you have to, constantly take leave. You're seen as highly unprofessional. So at that time, I thought I was making a very sensible decision. I would keep my own hours. I would be an entrepreneur. I had obviously invested a large amount of my life studying. I didn't want to see it go waste. Something that I only realized much later as an entrepreneur is you are always working. If it was someone else's shop, maybe I could have just called in sick, right? Maybe I could have just taken those 10 days off. I now carry my laptop to every family holiday. And the kids have also learned that work comes first. So I think, I thought I was being very sensible, and entrepreneurship would allow me the luxury of being a more hands-on mom. Whereas I think entrepreneurship has probably taught my kids more lessons than it's taught me. I was also clear about a few things. I wanted to carve my own identity. I didn't want to be amalgamated in the family business. I felt that was important. The other thing is I wanted to start something with low capital, if I'm being very honest. I didn't want to invest a lot of capital and put in like a crazy amount into factories or into land and then feel pressured to work. Right? I was also very young when I started off. I started Ivy Aspire at 23 and a half, 24. So the
Wow.
appetite for risk was very different. Numbers were very different. You wanted to always have an exit plan. You didn't know how much you'd be able to do. So this wasn't as well crafted. It was not as strategic. It was a 24-year-old saying, this is what I'm passionate about. This is where I know I can make a difference. This is something I know I want to do. And if I'm good at something and I love doing it, then that's what I should do.
Ma'am, what challenges did you face in your formative years, and how has the strategy and thought behind IVS Spy evolved since the time that you founded it?
So, in the beginning, I think I had some interesting challenges, which I could, in hindsight, perhaps look at as advantages. But it was kind of strange sometimes, working out of the basement of a hotel. I had no signage. So even if you went to the most unknown store, how do you get to know about a store? You'll see it somewhere. Someone will see it and Google you, right? I had the disadvantage of working in the basement of a hotel where even if you came into the elevator, and of course, here, you've seen this, even within the elevator, there isn't so much as a strip of Ivy Aspire. And because it is a listed company, I could have no conflict. So I couldn't do any of these things. And also, I did want to feel like I had earned my stripes. I never wanted someone to say she's so and so's daughter in law, so and so's daughter. So we're coming to her. Not that anyone would. I think nobody trusts their child because of obligation. But at that age, at 24, I thought it was difficult not having any presence and still trying to make a name. While at some level, I have always thought, and even at then I did, that age was my biggest asset. I was so close to my client. You can definitely imagine the very surprised impressions and expressions I would get of parents sometimes, when they ride down the elevator with me. And when you think of education, if it is a lady who's doing education, you think sari, you think glasses, you think very principled. And here I was, typically in jeans and a t-shirt, and I was dismissed in the elevator saying she must be some hotel guest, whatever. And then they would come into the cabin and then they'd meet me. And then they'd look at their child and they'd look at me and they'd look at their child and they'd look at me and they'd say, but how much older are you than our child? And their child was 17 and a half, 18. I was doing master's, kids were my age. And it was a bit baffling. So I know that parents at some point were a little uncomfortable that, look, she's a kid, right? And I had to sometimes very often fight the urge of knowing someone socially that perhaps my in-laws knew, and I would probably auntie, uncle them, and sit in a very formal professional setting and have to call them by name. Because if I said so and so auntie, I had definitely lost their respect, So I think that was interesting. I learned very young to not be obnoxious, but to hold my own in a meeting. And I feel like, that was something that those were some of the initial challenges. Also, I think on a personal front, I moved cities. I'm a Bombay girl. I had no family, no relationships, no cousins, nobody in Bangalore. So when I did come from Bombay, in Bombay, I had this very strong reputation. Everybody knew, oh, Shaista was very academic. She's an overachiever. So had I started in Bombay, I think my start would have been far easier. I had enough of a name. I was an Ivy League grad. All the kids, at least parents, friends, kids wanted to be like me. So I would have had that audience. Here I was nobody. I was just married into a family and I was the daughter-in-law, right? And here I had to kind of build my reputation from scratch. So I feel that's why I wear it very proudly on my shoulder, because I literally started from scratch. And I make no qualms. I have called clients who were going to meet other counselors who are far more established. And, I'd say, at least meet with me once. If you're happy, go ahead. If you're not happy, don't. What do you lose? Come and meet with me. And I've done those things. Right? I've had no shame in the business. I've been very ethical. And that's something I still hold myself to. So even through all these years, we have never compromised on ethics. If I'm uncomfortable doing something, we will not do it. We don't do things that are unethical. I've always had a no discount policy because everybody's child is as valuable to me. And I feel like, maybe these challenges set you up for later. So I had a very interesting start.
So first of all, that you already mentioned that one of your challenges is scalability. That has been over the years.
Of course.
So you yourself said that you are not able to touch all humans' life that you want to or intend to. So how did you choose your first team at Ivy?
Yeah, I feel the reverse happened. I feel my first team chose me. I think I chose them less. When I started, I was very much mom and pop. It was literally all me. So I would be the secretary. I would take the money also. I would send the emails also under an admin account. I've done it all. Right? I had this thing. I created a separate account called admin at IVSPI, and I only would email from that account as if it were my secretary, because I did not even want to invest in a secretary. And honestly, it did not come from risk aversion or a shortage of money. It came from a very clear belief, which I have always held, that I want to do this for the right reasons. I never want to take on a client because I have rent to pay. I never want to take on a client because I have someone's salary to pay. I want to do it if I can do justice to your future. So I kept my costs very low in the beginning because I also wanted to prove to myself what was my success rate. I didn't want to just take people on because I had expenses to meet. So I pretty much bootstrapped. I did everything myself. And only once I felt, yes, I'm confident of my model and I can deliver and I have success, which I was very fortunate, came very young, did I start investing. So the first member of my team, if I can call it that, was a shared resource. He was my husband's executive assistant. And I would from time to time share him. Sometimes if I were in a meeting, then what happens? Someone needs to kind of, pick up the phone. From day one, the day that I started Ivy Aspire, to today, I have only one cell phone number, which every client has. I've never changed it, even through the years. Every couple of months, a well-wisher, a friend, or my EO forum, or my husband will say, get a second phone. Right? This is not the way any professional works. But I have chosen to stick to that. When we did start recruiting, where I will say I have the biggest support is my husband is a co-founder. While he's not involved in the day-to-day, and Ivy Aspire is very much my baby, I do have his support when it comes to finance. So if I can honestly say, and these are very embarrassing things for an entrepreneur to admit, but because I want this to be honest, I don't look into the finance of my company at all. So if you tell me, hey, Ivy Aspire, I'm making a lot of money, where are you all investing? I really don't know. And that is truly out of choice. Again, it allows me to be very ethical. I'm never really motivated by a balance sheet or a target or something. It's motivated by doing good work. So my success is a client calling me up, hey, you made a difference. Hey, I want to reach out to you. It really is my bank balance. So he handles the finance and he helps me a lot with HR. So he helped me recruit people. So they're already gone through, one level through him. And then the rest is all vibe, right? So my only thing is very simple. Are you going to be passionate enough, Right? If you're not passionate and a client's call at 11 o'clock at night, which will happen from time to time, will irritate you, then you're not the right fit. And be in my business, you have to be very meticulous, right? So I have a very, very ambitious thing that I say. I, kind of liken myself to a doctor where I say we are playing with people's lives. So we don't have the luxury to mess up. So I need that person to understand the seriousness of that. So that's how my team came to me. I'm very fortunate I haven't had too much attrition. So my team has just stayed and we've slowly and steadily added members. But yeah, I think scale is always going to be one of my shortcomings, but I see it as my advantage, right? I want to do it because I want to impact your lives. I don't want to do it to, like be in 1,000 cities or have cursory interactions with people. That's not my goal.
What is the cost of acquisition of the customers, if you know about it? And what would be the ARPU?
For me, zero, right?
So you pay zero, there is no, all references you're saying.
Only references or organic Google search. So I do not pay, but I'm organically among the top. So for me, customer acquisition is zero, which is why all my counselors are told, and I don't have any counselor on an incentive model, right?
That is a best model.
Correct. So we have no push marketing. Ours is all pull. And that's why I explained to someone who's new in my team that please understand, a lead for me is you're not getting 1,000 leads. You're getting 3 leads, of which 3 will most likely convert. So for me, each lead is very valuable. The cost of acquisition may be zero, and it's a lot of my personal effort, blood, sweat, and tears. So I would say invaluable, but in terms of financially, zero.
And how much ARPU, what is the cost of the customer payment? Let's say, what is the long-term value? How much customer pays to each customer you charge?
That depends on the service and when they enroll with me.
In India, generally, companies have an issue of, of having an issue with quantity over quality. So how do you suppress the urge? Because after all, it's a business. So how do you suppress the urge of going for the quantity instead of the quality?
So there are 2 things that I'm going to share to this. One is this perceived notion of, people's belief that it cannot be both. And I learned this lesson again. I think a lot of my life has been trial and error. So must have been among the earlier years in my career, where honestly, I was very comfortable handling the number of clients I was handling that year. And let's not forget, I've had 2 babies during this. I've never taken a day off work. So I've varied the number of clients based on what I could handle. I don't have a fixed. It's not like every year I have to hit this target. If this year I feel my clients are very demanding, I'll take less clients, and that's okay. My costs are low. Most of my places are self-owned, right? So that's what I arm twist family. Like in Bombay also, I work out of a family office. I don't have fancy offices. My husband had to almost force me to install an AC in my RMB office. So I've intentionally kept costs very low. I don't want to pay electricity, right? I'd rather take 1 client less. That's my model. But I realized how perception is very important. So I had this client who came in for one of my sessions, and I would do this one particular session for my undergrad in person. And I thought, I was trying to be very new age and American, where I would let my clients interact with one another. And I thought it was great for, other parents to form support in each other. And I've had nothing to hide, and I'm very transparent. My business is word of mouth. If you're going to bitch me out, I have no problem. I have nothing to hide. And this client came in, and for whatever reason, right? Maybe he thought I was doing 3 kids a year. I have no idea. But when he saw the number that I was doing, it freaked him out. And everybody comes with their own perception. For somebody, maybe 1,000 is too little. Maybe for somebody, 10 is too much. It's personal. And from then on, right? And I must have literally, because I was also so new in my career, and also I think it is also my nature, I must have stood on my head to try and please this client, right? And he had twin daughters, and I have done umpteen calls and literally done everything up the wazoo. But the client had made up his mind that she's overcommitted. And at the end, he wrote me this email with feedback, to which I responded point to point. And I realized that life is not logic. It's a feeling. Once that perception is, kind of built, there's nothing you can do. So I realized this is also a perception. It's not always a reality. And I don't think it's anyone's place to make that judgment on my behalf. There may be a year when 10 kids are too much for me to handle, but let me decide that. There may be a year when maybe I can do 30. Let me decide that. Right? So I feel like that was one very important line, that perception is something and reality is another. And it's very difficult to change someone's mind. And I also realized at that age, I'm not in the business of changing people's minds. Right? That's not my job. So that was one realization. Second was the fact that I'm very, very, very acutely aware of how important word of mouth is. So there is never a temptation to take on a client, do injustice for two reasons. One is truly ethics. And I will always say this, and I make no bones about this, that I do have the luxury of saying no to people. I'm not putting food on the table. If I were, I would have looked at this very differently. So if I feel I can't do justice, this is not going to work, I will say no. I do have that luxury. Right? I realize truly, if I don't do a good job, not only will I be ruining that child's life, which I'll have to hold for the rest of my life, that person is going to bitch me out to 5 other people. So while goodwill is hard earned, it's also lost in a minute, right? And let's not forget, we're in India, right? We're in a service industry. You need to make one screw up for people to hold that over your head. And the one thing that I feel, has really separated me from anyone else, and we all see this in our careers, right? We go to so many doctors, we go to architects, we go to interior designers, and we are so willing to take credit ourselves and so willing to give brick back, right? I've gone to 100 friends' homes who paid the most expensive architect or interior designer, and still they will say, yeah, babe, but at the end, I did everything. And I honestly feel like saying, but then why did you hire the person? You're a fool. If you did everything, what was wrong with you? But it's our mentality, right? Maybe the architect or interior designer asked for your opinion. Ma'am, do you like blue versus red? And sure, you get that opinion. Maybe they showed you 5 swatches. Of course, it's your house. But don't take credit. So that is the mentality that we come with. Given that, what I think is one of my biggest strengths is still, if I've had people giving me credit where it's so easy to take credit away, right? Then this model works. And that is something that I'm very aware of. I think it keeps me very humble, right? To date, even if I feel, I'm not going to convert a client, but a client wants a word with me, I will still make that call. I will always try my best to do an extra thing for a client. I feel truly, I will never forget I got into this to help people. Right? What was my goal? To help people. Why? Because I felt lonely, because I felt I didn't have the best experience. So that keeps me motivated. And number two, the reality, right? If I have helped you, you will still have 10 good things to say about me. Maybe I won't get a client. Maybe I won't get your business. But who knows? 10 years later, maybe your child will be applying and you'll think of her. Ah, she was good. Let me call her. Or you'll tell someone else. Listen, before you make up your mind, just meet her once. So to me, it's very simple. It's in black and white. The day I forget it, right, I may as well close shop.
How did the value formation came from the parents?
I think what's interesting is I was raised like a typical conservative Punjabi girl. And I'll tell you a true story where, of course, when I went to UPenn, I didn't go on any scholarship. My family paid full money, right? I was given a very healthy bank account also as an emergency. Everything was done. So I knew, of course, I knew studying abroad was expensive. That much so sense you had. I remember at 17 when I saw the bags and bags and bags being packed to send me to college. I remember thinking at that age, it's almost like they're setting up a separate house for me, and I remember thinking that should be expensive, but I didn't understand how much. I didn't have, a monetary sense that this is costing in thousands or lakhs. So I had no such sense. So I never knew how much college cost. I had never looked into the financials. The fees were paid, and I was touch wood, never once told to my family. And God has been very, very kind to have given me that background. I was never once told, "Beta, we are paying so much, you better make this back, or you have to earn it back, or you better make good on it." It was never mentioned. My only task when I decided to apply to college last minute, I was never told it's too expensive, we have not budgeted for it, which was never part of the plan. I was never told how much it cost. I was never told get a scholarship. I was told, and this is a very Indian thing, I don't think that was a good thing, but I was told, beta, get into an Ivy League. If you don't get into an Ivy League, you are not going. Because of ignorance, right? I think my mother only knew that. She didn't know anything beyond that. So she said it. Someone must have told her at a kitty party. So she told me those words. Beta, agar Ivy League mein milega, you will go. Nahi milega, you will sit in India. So that was, then I told my mother at that time, I said, done. But if I get an Ivy League, then I am going. Then don't say no. I'm not working so hard for nothing. So that was my deal. When I helped my first student professionally, not as a friend, when I helped my first student get into college, that kid got into Berkeley, which is why I always joke I'm the Berkeley counselor. And the parent asked me, how much does it cost? I was 24. I had no idea. I had done all my research and I had years on admissions committees and I knew everything about admissions. I didn't know how much college cost. And I remember being very embarrassed and making some sort of a thing that each college costs something different and I will have to work out the math or something. I must have said whatever my 24-year-old brain had taught me to say when you're caught in a class assignment and you're not prepared. And then I calculated. And when I saw the budget and I saw UPenn's money, I was like, oh my God, how did they spend so much money? This is crazy. So I think I was very shielded. So that's very nice. But I do feel that that value for money was always integrated. It was always something where, while the denomination was not shared, I don't think value for money was not taught. I think value for money was always taught. And I think a little bit came from also the fact that because I had never been asked for anything, right? I had never been given any, you have to get this much. I had never been put on pocket money. I had a lot of freedom, right? And after I got married, I wanted that freedom. So I think as a girl, I was never taught ki haath philao and you'll get money or pucho. Right? In mom's house, money was given. There were no questions asked. And in fact, I was so spoiled by my granddad, who's no more. And I always think of this story. He used to always tell me, we used to have this chocolate tart in my school in Cathedral, which used to cost 25 rupees. These amazing chocolate tarts. And 25 rupees, that time used to be expensive because most things in the canteen were $5, $10, 25 was quite a bit. So he used to always give me 50 rupees. So he used to say that Shaista will not eat it alone. If her friend doesn't have the money, she will not eat it. So he used to give me 50 rupees. Then he used to ask me, Beta, did you go? Did you buy that tart? And if I said no, he used to punish me. He used to say, if you don't spend it, I will punish you. If you spend the money, I will give you 100 rupees. Every girl should know how to have heart and how to spend on people. So I was raised with that. So money was appreciated. It's not like it wasn't. But I was raised with plenty. And after I got married, I wanted to ensure that I had plenty that I could provide myself and for my kids. Right? I never wanted to not have my kids realize the value of work, not realize the value of money. And I felt that my kids would grow up and they would say, but what are you doing? You're telling me to work hard, study, but you're also sitting at home, right? What are you earning? What are you bringing to the table? So I felt these questions at some level always plagued me. So maybe this is perhaps, the things that you see at home, little things kind of stay with you, right?
What are the key learnings and takeaways from your journey that you would like to share with the budding entrepreneurs?
First is always be close to your customer. Never outsource your customer. I feel like that happens a lot. People are very willing to be, very far away from the customer. If you're close to your customer, you'll get negative feedback immediately. You'll immediately know what's not working, which I think immediately as an entrepreneur keeps you on your toes. Number two, I think humility. As big as you may become, as successful as you may think you are, the day that you feel like you've achieved something, then your days are numbered. So that humility, always knowing that there is a new player in the market, someone who will do better. Right? So you have to constantly feel that, yes, am I bettering myself? So that humility to say, I don't know it all. And which is why very intentionally, I'm not going to lie, of course, in Bangalore, I've established a team. I have 3 offices and I did it at a young age. I had to go to other markets. In Bombay, I started as a fresher. Right? So now, after having so many years under your belt, people giving you as their first name, to suddenly go into the most competitive market and people say, who? What does she do? I've never heard of her. Right? I think that's a great kick, which we all need from time to time. The third thing that I've learned is truly nothing is not your deliverable as much as you might think it's not your deliverable. So you have to be willing to expand and you have to be willing as much as you can, right, within your expertise, to go beyond to satisfy a customer. Because a customer is paying for X. If you deliver X and even if you deliver it very well, a customer is not beholden to you. The customer's attitude is, this is something I paid for. But it's only when you give Y do you create a relationship. That's when the customer feels, yes, she did beyond. And that why I have learned comes at a personal cost. It is always a personal sacrifice. You doing it at a time that was not convenient to you, you going out of your scope, you probably prioritizing your family, number 2, right? You perhaps having had the longest day and still wanting to listen to that client for an hour. But in that lies the magic, in that lies the relationship. And the fourth, I don't think anything in the world, right, trumps relationships. As much as we might live in the modern world and we're doing all of this, virtually. But the minute you forget that there's a human being at the end, right, who's also looking for human things. I think that's what separates you. My whole Chennai expansion was done by clients. Clients got me started. They had seminars for me. They said you have to be in Chennai. So I feel like that is something that, I feel sometimes we just forget that it's a relationship. Right? We start getting a little bit synthetic, ticking the box, getting it done. Sometimes just knowing that the other person at the other end is also a human being, who's also going through a tough day, or depending on your line, whatever it is. But that human thing goes a very long way. And bootstrap, yeah, have no ego. I think sometimes in India, people have so many hassles and egos and all of that stuff. So I feel like I don't have any of that. I'm very happy to say, and I always say it, I don't think I'm the best. I don't think I know everything. Right? What I know, and I will say it confidently. But hey, I'm willing to learn. If I can learn something from you to better something for your child, I'm very happy to do it. I have no problem. And also being consistent. If you have certain rules, you have certain regulations, then you have to follow it. You yourself cannot violate. So a lot of India does like this differential pricing, a lot of this, going around in circles. Be straightforward. I think people appreciate it. So those are at least my beliefs.
This issue was raised by one of my managers that you listen to the customer a lot.
Yeah.
So where should we draw the line? Where does where's the line that you should stop, thinking from the perspective of the customer, and also think about the work that you have to do? Because sometimes what happens is that customers might be asking something, but that is outside of our prerogative. So how do you tackle that problem?
So, those are always tricky. And I think it's important to understand when you can. And of course, this is easier said than done. Sometimes we're all human beings and we all react, myself included, right? Is to understand where the customer is coming from. So there is one kind of customer that I feel who cannot be satisfied, right? Even if you say I'm going to, walk on hot coal, they will still not be satisfied. So it's important to be clear with that customer. This is my deliverable. These are the issues I'm facing. I want to be upfront, have a clear dialogue, and then make your peace with it. That no matter what you do, this is a customer from whom you're going to get nothing, not even a good feeling. And getting something doesn't only mean word of mouth or business, but it's not even going to be fulfilling to yourself. But it's a professional thing. You've taken it on. You do justice. You go the extra mile. But with that, so perhaps then if the customer is telling me stand on your head, I might be less likely to. Second is a customer who's truly maybe asking these things not with the intent of being difficult or with the intent of, kind of being difficult to satisfy, but perhaps they are going through a tough time or they have a lot of pressure from their bosses or whatever it might be. So to that customer is where you have to go the extra mile to impress them, because that is the customer who really needs the help. So if that customer gets treated like your first customer, then you're making, I think, a crucial mistake. Then there is a third customer, right? Who's Indian, who wants to squeeze value. Okay, nichodo or nichodo or nichodo. And you give a finger, they want a hand. You give a hand, they want an arm. So you give till the arm, right? First, when they take the finger, you smile, you don't say anything. When you give your hand also, you smile. When they ask for the arm, you let them know it's beyond your scope, but you do it, right? Then hopefully, when they come to asking more, you've also created that thing that, look, I've gone over and above once, twice, thrice. Either this is out of my expertise, I'm so sorry, or I will do it when I can get to it. I'm sorry, this is outside my scope. You still need help. If it's within my expertise, I will do it, but not on priority. And then you hope that they're also reasonable at some level and they will appreciate that.
New education policy is already launched. The draft has already come out, and I'm sure you must be really very, very happy that the interdisciplinary educational culture is coming to schools in India. So what's your take that you have experienced the same thing way back in early 2000s, and now say in 2021, which is going to be rolled out for masses? So what impact do you see?
I think it's going to be amazing. I think for a lot of kids, who are very young and asked to figure out what they want to do, I think this will take the pressure off. I think one of the biggest issues plaguing the education system in general is just the pressure on youth. So I think the mental trauma that kids are going through today is really, sky high. I think people at work have less of a stressful situation. So I'm hoping these things will, give kids a lot more confidence, a lot more self-esteem, more avenues to explore what their interests are. So I think it's a change for the better. Of course, I also have a part of me that's skeptical. A lot of this depends on how it's implemented. Sometimes in theory, certain words sound wonderful, but it all depends on how they implement it. What are the stigmas around it? Are certain subjects still going to be considered softer subjects? Will they not be offered? Will teachers still push kids towards taking what they consider the more difficult subjects? So I think implementation is key, and education around this to parents, to teachers, is also going to be really critical.
One is what do you think is the startup is facing challenge? Let's say 10 years back, a startup in India, and now what scenario has got changed? What is still problems startups are facing, and what do you think? Like, you've been in the US and India, what kind of the environment, government, regulatory support do you need to make it better environment for the startup? And what are the things, the sectors for like where which will, after IT, which are the sectors do you think will be bigger sectors after IT?
So while I'm not an authority on this, my husband does work a lot in the startup space, and he's very knowledgeable. So I'm going to dip into a little bit that I've kind of learned from being privy to a little bit of his knowledge as well. I feel here the startup game seems very interesting, right? Which a lot of things in life typically are. If you have some sort of a track record of success, or for whatever reason, right, you click with a VC, then it's almost like you can make no mistake. So you'll see the perpetuating startup, right? Kunal Bal, one of our dear friends, Snapdeal. You'll see the same thing happened with Ritesh Agarwal of Oyo, right? Where the same startup keeps getting funded. The proof in the model comes much later. Then you're not being vetted, right? You just have the big names who are attracting the big names, which can be a bit scary for people who are also in the space but may not have hit it first. Then if you're in the same space, to kind of continue gets very, very difficult. So I feel sometimes there needs to be slightly less of, if I can use the word, nepotism within the startup world as well, where you really have to rely a little bit more on numbers or have some idea, because right now the burn is very high. I don't really know who's making money. So I foresee this as a big difference between someone who's running a business versus someone who's looking to build a startup, maybe raise capital or sell out. So to me, I feel like that's interesting. If you've hit it big, great, right? And startups are wonderful. It's the right place to be. If you're still struggling, it doesn't mean that your model is inferior or anything. You may be profitable, and that poor person is wondering that I'm more profitable. Why are they not letting me burn money? So there seems to be an interesting paradox in, what VCs seem to like and don't like, and what names hit them in the team, what don't hit them. If you are, so I feel like that's interesting. In terms of sectors that'll do well, I feel beauty and healthcare will always do well. People always want to look beautiful. They always want to look young. And I think Nykaa kind of proves it. And with Falguni doing this very cool job of really using words like AI and all, just to bring us brick and mortar Nykaa stores, which is frankly what everybody wants. And also on the first day that lockdown ended, Nykaa sales did 3 crores in a day. So I think forever, for the rest of, till the donkeys come home, people will always be vain. So I know anything in that space, I believe, will always do well. I think healthcare will always do well, right? People are becoming more aware of health. COVID is obviously kind of taken that to the next level. And I feel education. I feel these 3 fields, to a large extent, are recession proof. Maybe before COVID, people would have said weddings are recession proof. We're seeing that industry also is being disrupted. Let's see how it comes back. But these are the 3 industries where I'd place my money. And I think mental health. So when I'm saying education, I'm also talking about mental well-being for kids. I believe very strongly in that space. But something that people, I feel everyone is going more towards saying it's not just consumerism that's going to make us happy. Not that people will not be consumeristic. Of course they will be, right? We will still buy those clothes and we still want to look good, and we are vain. So you will still go to Nykaa and shop. But today you are more aware that you not only need to feed, the external, you also need to feed the internal, because people are inherently dissatisfied and they are now open to talking about it. So I feel, to me, that's a very interesting space to be in.
So, ma'am, now a closing question, which is so close to your heart and which you have been doing for so many years. But if on the common platform, if you can share a few tips to all the budding students who want to get into the Ivy League and thrive there,
right.
What are the tips to thrive in the big campuses?
So I think one of the tips for life, and something that I feel I learned the hard way at college, is time management. So I think at any age, myself included, we can always learn to manage our time better, to prioritize. And I think a key philosophy of someone who goes to a top tier school, I won't use the word Ivy League, I was fairly scarred by it myself. So I'm just going to say a top tier school or a competitive school, is realizing that it's not about doing this or that. but it's about doing this and that and doing it well. So I feel like that's something that I definitely want to share, that the quicker you can learn to manage your time, to prioritize correctly, very useful. I think, again, something that is a life lesson is productivity. So sometimes I feel people put in a lot of hours, but their productivity is really low. This is also something in the work culture. So you need to work to train your own mind on productivity, come up with your own rules, because eventually time will be limited, right? So the productivity matrix, I think, is also very, very important. And truly pursuing your passion. I think sometimes, and I feel that more so in the last 5 or 6 years, as there is more knowledge, as there is more information, as we speak to more people, there has become so much of a template of what you need to get done. This is like a rat race. I need to put all these things into my profile. I need to start an Ivy League and I need to be part of 10 things. But that doesn't last very long. Or it's so force-fitted, it's not going to take you very far. So just taking a minute and saying, what do I want to do? How much do I want to do? Picking those things and then committing to it. So while I'm definitely saying time management and efficiency, to some level also being able to pick your battles. Because I feel a lot of people do a lot of little things, then don't and do a whole lot of nothing. So that's something that I would think, again, if you are going to a competitive school, you need to pick few things because you're passionate, not because mom and dad said or your friend said or someone has told you it'll help you get an iBanking job or make you a consultant to get you into a hedge fund. But what am I good at? Pick those things and then persist. Again, I think persistence typically is something that all of us from time to time, vary on. So it's very easy to go this far and then the minute it gets tough, withdraw. So anything in life, persistence is also key. Right? So if you keep these few things, I think, in your toolkit and from time to time draw on these, you're pretty much going to be successful wherever you are.
Thanks, ma'am. Thanks a ton.
Thanks
for your
so
time.
much, everybody,
and
for
great
giving me your
insights.
evening.